Hello everyone and welcome to lesson 12.1C. I've entitled this video, Action Jackson. This video is going to cover pages 327 to 329. Jackson as president. Andrew Jackson had qualities most Americans admired. He was a patriot, a self-made man, and a war hero. Thousands of ordinary people came to Washington for his inauguration. Later, many attended a White House reception. Question number 1. What qualities did Andrew Jackson have that made most Americans admire him? Well, he was a patriot, so he fought for his country. He was a self-made man, which means, as you see the definition there, he wasn't born into wealth. He wasn't born into success. He had to earn it. He had to work for it. He had to scrap. And Americans back then really appreciated that. And he was a war hero. At the Battle of New Orleans, the War of 1812, he was a war hero. He had also battled the Native Americans in Spanish Florida, so he was a man of action, and people liked that. Expanded voting rights. President Andrew Jackson promised, quote, equal protection and equal benefits for all Americans, at least all white American men. Jackson's promise reflected the spirit of the times. In the nation's early years, only men who owned property or paid taxes could vote. By the 1820s, many states had loosened these requirements. White male sharecroppers, factory workers, and others could now participate in the political process. By 1828, nearly all states let voters, rather than state legislatures, choose presidential electors. Women still could not vote. African Americans and Native Americans had few rights of any kind. Question number 2. What are some ways that Americans became more democratic during the age of Jackson time? Well, you started to see more people could vote. It wasn't just the people who owned property or paid taxes. Now it was many more people. Sharecroppers, factory workers, they could all participate in the process. So more and more people were starting to get the opportunity to vote, and nearly all states let voters, rather than the state legislatures, pick who was going to be the presidential electors. Question number 3. What 3 groups of people did not experience the same opportunities as these white males at that time? Women, African Americans, and Native Americans. Making government more democratic. Democrats wanted to further open government to the people. They argued that ordinary citizens could do most government jobs. They were disturbed that the federal government had become a bureaucracy, a system in which non-elected officials carry out laws. Soon after taking office in 1829, Jackson fired many federal workers and replaced them with his supporters. The fired employees protested. They charged that the president was acting like a tyrant. One Jackson supporter said, quote, to the victors belong the spoils. In other words, because Jackson had won the election, his supporters had the right to the spoils, or benefits of victory. This practice of replacing current government employees with supporters of the winner is called the spoils system. Question number 4. What does the word bureaucracy mean? It's a system in which non-elected officials carry out laws. Question number 5. What action did President Jackson take after he took office that had some of his opponents calling him a tyrant? Well, he fired a lot of the people that had worked in the federal government from the previous administration, and he replaced them with his people that supported him in his campaign. Question 6. What does the expression to the victors belong the spoils mean? It means that the people that win the election have the right to the benefits of that victory. And in this case, Jackson's like, hey, I won, so I've got the right to fire these people and replace them with my people. And that's question number 7. What is the spoils system? The practice of replacing current government employees with the supporters of the person who won. That is called the spoils system. Jackson's supporters also abandoned the unpopular caucus system, in which top party leaders chose the party's candidates for office. Instead, parties began using nominating conventions, pictured here at the bottom. These are more modern nominating conventions, where delegates from the states choose the party's presidential candidate. This system allowed many more people to participate in the selection of candidates. Question number 8. Under the old caucus system, who picked the party's candidates for office? The top party leaders, so the elite people. Question number 9. When using the nominating conventions, who picks the party's candidate for president? In that case, it is the people, the delegates from the states. They are getting to choose the presidential candidate. And so it's a much more democratic process. The tariff debate. A tariff is a tax on imported goods, and we've talked about that many times now. The high tariff on European manufactured goods was pleasing to Northeastern factory owners. Tariffs made European goods more expensive. This encouraged Americans to buy American-made goods. Southerners disliked the tariff. They had a profitable trade selling their cotton to Europe. They feared that taxing European goods might hurt this trade. In addition, tariffs meant higher prices for the goods they bought from their European trading partners. So question number 10, what is a tariff? A tariff is a tax on imported goods. Question number 11, why did the Northerners like the tariff? Northerners liked the tariff because it made European goods more expensive, and thus people would be more likely to buy American-made goods. And those American-made goods were often made in Northeastern factories. Question 12, why did the Southerners not like the tariff? Southerners did not like the tariff for two reasons. One, they were fearful that if the tariff in America made Europeans not sell as much, they were afraid that that might actually hurt their trade of cotton to Europe. And secondly, the goods that were sent over from Europe, because of the tariff, those were more expensive, and they didn't want to pay more expensive prices for the goods that they wanted. In 1828, Congress had passed a very high tariff law. Vice President Calhoun claimed that a state had the right to nullify or refuse to accept a federal law if it was not in that state's best interest. President Jackson disagreed with his reasoning. He feared that nullification would destroy the Union. In 1830, at a Washington dinner marking Thomas Jefferson's birthday, Jackson had a chance to make his feelings on nullification known. He offered a toast. Looking directly at Calhoun, the president declared, quote, "Our Union, it must be preserved." Answering Jackson's challenge, the vice president rose with a toast of his own, quote, "The Union next to our liberty most dear." To make sure his meaning was clear, Calhoun added, "It can only be preserved by respecting the rights of the states." Not long after Jackson and Calhoun faced off at the dinner, Congress passed the Maysville Road Bill. The bill provided federal funds for the building of a road in Kentucky. Jackson vetoed the bill. Jackson argued that because the road would be entirely within Kentucky, it should be a state project. In other words, the federal government should support only projects that benefited the entire nation. Question number 13. When Congress passed a high tariff in 1828, Vice President John C. Calhoun said that states have the right to do what? To nullify or refuse to accept a federal law if it wasn't in their own interest. Question number 14. Why did President Jackson disagree with Calhoun's views? He disagreed because he felt like nullification would destroy the country and it would cause a civil war. Question 15. What did the dinner party with President Jackson and Vice President Calhoun show about our country at that time in history? Well, this back and forth exchange that they had clearly showed that there were splintering sides in our country. There was a differing opinion not only on slavery but on states' rights. The southern states leaned towards wanting more power to go to the states. The northern states felt like more power should be in the federal government, which, by the way, is what is in the Constitution. Question number 17. Oh, wait a second. Here we go. There's where question 17 will be found. But let's go back to question 16 because I have to answer that one first. All right, question 16. Why did President Jackson and the Maysville Road Bill that Congress had passed, why did he veto that? He vetoed it because it was only going to help the state of Kentucky. And according to his views, Jackson's views, he believed that a bill like that should benefit more than just one state. He felt like those projects should support the entire country. And because this was all within Kentucky, he felt it was more of a state idea than a federal idea. Okay, now we're ready to move on to the next slide. In 1832, Congress passed a lower tariff. It was not enough to cool the protest. South Carolina passed the Nullification Act, declaring it would not pay, quote, illegal tariffs. The state threatened to secede or break away from the Union if the federal government interfered. Question number 17. What state passed the Nullification Act in 1832? That was the state of South Carolina. Question 18. What was the Nullification Act? The Nullification Act was a law passed by South Carolina, and what it said is they would not pay the illegal tariffs, illegal according to them. They were saying, we will just not follow the rule that the federal government has passed. Question 19. What did South Carolina threaten to do if the federal government interfered with their rights? They threatened to secede, which we've heard that word before. That means to break away. And eventually South Carolina will be the first state to secede from our country. And that'll happen a couple decades later. Jackson believed in a strong union. He asked Congress to pass the Force Bill. This act allowed him to use the military to enforce federal law. South Carolina accepted the new tariff, but nullified the Force Bill. And question 20, what was the Force Bill? The Force Bill was Andrew Jackson's way as president to get Congress to say, hey, if a state won't agree to one of the things that we pass, the military can be used to enforce that federal law. You can start to see the tensions brewing between the two different sides and how they viewed states' rights versus the federal government's power. Well, thank you so much for watching. Before we go, I've got a meme for Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson's bodyguards, there to protect you from Andrew Jackson. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.